Now then, Trevor meets the men who keep alive an ancient way of fishing using nets stretched from 20-foot-long poles on a river in Pembrokeshire. It's Fishlocks, Wales.
Fishlocks, Wales, sponsored by coastalcottages.co.uk. Holidays somewhere unspoilt.
With its hundreds of miles of coast and river, Wales has a long history of fish dinners. But first, catch your fish. And in this programme, we'll be looking at boats and traditional contraptions, that marriage of art and science that land a fish in the frying pan. Pembrokeshire, daybreak on the Cleddau River, gentle rain, the whisper of a falling tide. Time to go fishing. Fishermen gather in their riverside hutch at Little Milford to watch the water and wait for the right moment. In this same shelter 35 years ago, their predecessors were filmed getting ready to catch salmon the traditional way.
L1.
We've come to see how things have changed. But Jim, what's happening today?
Well, hopefully we're going to catch a salmon, Trevor. I can see a couple of the boys here ready already. Yes, our intention is to take up one of these stakes here and see if we can stop one of these fish, which will be the first time this year for myself. I haven't caught a fish yet.
In the 1970s, these men were well aware of the decline in salmon in a river that once swarmed with them.
But catch them they do, occasionally. This season has been one of the worst on record. Half a dozen fish a week, amongst all of them, are all they get. They blame the weather, the trawlers, the fly fishermen, and the illicit poaching of salmon, still carried out despite all the water bailiffs and new boats with which the authorities have equipped themselves.
Since those days, a catch like this has become a rare event. But fishermen, of course, always hope.
The tide today is a good tide. Yes, there's a bit of pace in the tide. It's making tide. It's going for a bigger spring tide. So yes, this is a fairly good day. And although this is a fisherman's story, you may believe, we've seen 2 salmon jump in here this morning. And that's the first time any of us have seen fish jump in here this season.
Well, it's our job to go after them, isn't it?
I hope so, yes. We'll do our very best, Trevor.
Gone fishing.
Ah, you know.
But there's a sign upon your door.
Uh-huh.
Gone fishing.
I'm real gone, man.
You ain't working anymore.
Could be.
There's your hole out in the sun, where you left a row half done. You claim that hoeing ain't no fun.
But I can prove it.
You ain't got no ambition.
My father was fishing here from 1932. He passed away sadly in 1991. But I picked it up from probably about 13 or 14, although I was in the boat with him from 7 or 8.
35 years ago, when this film was made, fishing was strictly limited.
Although the season starts in March, they don't usually begin fishing until May, when the Canada geese who live on the river start to enjoy the warmer weather.
Now they've restricted us to just June, July and August, which equates to about 2 dozen tides per season. It's very limited now to what it was.
And why is there that restriction?
Well, they have to impose restrictions because of the reduction in the salmon. Things are not as they were. I mean, it's nationwide, it's worldwide. The experts are obviously trying to find out what the problems are. Obviously, deep sea fishing must account for some of this, and we can't rule out global change. I don't know the answer. All we know is that when we go fishing and come home without fish and don't see fish, something is very different.
As the tide ebbs, the fishermen stretch a rope across the river and secure it to stakes on the riverbank. Then they set their nets. It's called compass fishing because the net is attached to 2 long poles, resembling a drawing compass. Fishermen on the Cleddau used this technique throughout the 19th century. And the poles are counterbalanced by heavy stones. So it takes a bit of brawn and good shoulders and a lot of skill to manhandle the poles in the strong tide.
Yeah.
The fisherman holds 3 feeler lines which tell him when a salmon enters the net. Well, Jim, you've done all the hard work now.
By the beads on my brow, Trevor, that's correct. It is the warmest part of the job, yes.
Here we are.
You're a good swimmer, Trevor. Mm-hmm. Can you swim?
Yes, I can.
Oh, well done. You can save me then.
Is it a really efficient way of catching a salmon?
Well, not really. I think that probably the most efficient way to catch a salmon is to put a net right across the river. But of course, we're restricted as to what we do, and the span of our poles. We've got a restricted span, as is the size of the mesh. No, in answer to your question, it isn't really. It's a bit of chance, and a bit of skill, really.
Do you think it will go on?
Yes, I very much hope so. There seems a more positive atmosphere and attitude from the Environment Agency these days. We believe it's a heritage fishing, you see. This has been such a long time here that in this ever-changing world we see, and no one likes the changes, why change anything like this? I don't know anywhere else in the world that this is done like this.
It's a big jump from compass nets to sea-going trawlers. Downriver, where the Cleddau joins the sea, Milford Haven was for 70 years or more one of the top British fishing ports. Trawlers landing a huge silvery harvest. Ray Harding was one of those trawlermen, a man seasoned by gales. At Milford Haven Museum, he told me of life at sea. At its peak, Milford employed more than 4,000 people. The fish market, the auctions, and the railway terminal worked 6 days a week. In the end, though, the industry failed through overfishing. What did people do? Did they feel excited about the fishing? Did they feel that they were rich?
Yeah, well, especially us deckhands, right? Come ashore then, have a good spend up, going to dance and whatever. Some drank and got drunk all day, every day. And they call us millionaire deckies.
Does it seem strange to you, working in this wonderful museum, knowing that the museum is about your life?
Because there's no trawlers here now, especially the young ones, they think the fish are boiling the fish up, I think.
Gone fishing by a shady...
Back on the Cleddau, there's a youngster who knows exactly where fish come from, and he's learning how to catch them the old-fashioned way. Callum Morgan is 13 years old and plans to be a link between the older generation and the future.
Gone fishing instead of just...
I'm going to frying pan tomorrow morning.
I caught my first salmon last year, the end of the fishing season last year. We were out on the boat and Dad let me have the feelers for the last about half an hour of fishing. Thought I felt a tug and I said to Dad, oh, something's hit me now. So he took the nets down and there's really nice salmon in the net. I was really pleased.
Does it mean a lot to you that you might take over in the future?
Yeah, I think it's really nice because my dad's done it, and if I did it, maybe I could pass it down. Then if I had children, they might do it and it could carry on.
So you've got a real sense of history.
Yeah.
We gone fishing instead of just a wishing. Oh, yeah.
Although we're not catching fish at the moment, it's always the ability to come back out here again and do it. You know, it's like a drug, really.
So this is the magic time, really.
Yeah, it is, yes, yeah. It would be better, Trevor, if I'd be a little bit more excited if we had one in the bottom of the boat by now.
Yes.
Not just because you're with me, but...
next time.
Maybe, yeah.
For old time's sake and the sheer contemplative pleasure of it all, the compass net fishermen of the Cleddau keep sticking their 20-foot poles into the river, hoping that a salmon will sidle into their nets. Some of them learnt the art at their grandfather's knee and hope to pass on the magic to their own grandchildren. After the break, we head to Anglesey on the trail of a fish dinner. And we also catch some eels, mysterious and tasty.
Fishlocks Wales, sponsored by coastalcottages.co.uk. Holidays somewhere unspoiled.
Sunday, my day off. Rain in neutral. What are you doing here? It's another murder. See you later.
God, for small murders.
A typical day in Midsummer. Brand new Midsummer Murders, Wednesday at 8, ITV1.
This ain't a movie, no fairy tale conclusion, y'all. Sometimes it's heaven sent, then we head back to hell again. We kiss, then we make up on the way. Though it's not a fantasy, I still want you to stay. We're just ordinary people. We don't know which way to go.
Fishlocks Wales, sponsored by coastalcottages.co.uk. Holidays somewhere unspoiled.
Welcome back, and from the River Cleddau we've moved to the Menai Strait to meet a true man of the sea who in a long career as a marine biologist, a lobster fisherman and deep sea diver seems to have spent more time under the water than above it. David Macready has lived an adventurous life and in 40 years has dived all over the world. But this remains his first love, the Menai Strait. He glides in his element among the lurking conger eels.
I'm not really interested in going out in a boat with winches and baiting and pulling pots. I mean, those pots are fishing 24 hours a day. I'm giving the lobster a chance. I can only dive when it's slack water. At the risk of a bend, I'm limited on my depths, I'm limited on my times. So I select the lobsters I want. I don't catch the little ones, I leave them alone. I only catch ones that I know are big enough. So I'm selectively fishing.
Sometimes lobsters fight back. That's what claws are for. David, though, has many years of underwater experience and gets his lobster. David, more than 30 years ago now, you came to this spot on the Menai Strait and made a film with Winford Vaughan-Thomas. That must have been an experience.
It certainly was. At that time, I had the old boathouse in Vaynol Park as lobster tanks. I had not long left university, And like now in a bit of a recession, there were very few jobs, so I took it on myself to start a business with lobsters. I'd be catching them in here, keeping them in cages, and then we managed to get the big tanks in Veinall.
They won't bite, will they?
No, no. Their claws are all banded up, look.
They were cheap in the summer, dear in the winter, and I used to dive every day from September to Christmas, feeding them with fish waste, and then get them out before Christmas. And the first year I sold them all in Billingsgate. I took them all down in a Mini. You can get 1,000 lobsters in a Mini if you try, if you take the seats out.
I see some of them totally different.
Yes,
There's one over
there's
there.
one here.
Grab that one. I'll put this
There.
Ever intrepid, Winford was the sort of man who wouldn't duck a challenge.
He wanted to come diving with me, so I said, well, can you dive? He said, well, I was with Cousteau when they started. So, but then he was a little bit egg-shaped. So we eventually found a suit that would fit him. We had to lie him on his back so we could zip it, because the zip was up the front.
Just gradually, just go gradually to the edge of the boat, hand on your mask, and over you go.
Winford was then in his late 60s.
He went ploop, and that was it, gone. So, oh, blimey. So I got on it. No one else could help me, so I got my gear on as fast as I could, went down the bubbles, and of course, being egg-shaped then, his weight belt had come from his waist and gone round his ankles. So he'd gone straight down to the bottom. He couldn't fin. So I had to go down, take the weight belt off, free him to the side and pump him out. But that didn't deter him. No, the show must go on. Let's go diving.
Winford described his adventure in this film.
Down through the translucent green to the bottom. The seaweeds seem to change colour as you light them up. There are the bright red antennae of a real beauty. But he defends himself with his wide-open claws. A big lobster could take your finger off with them.
Winford Vaughan Thomas and the man-eating lobster.
We got one! We got one! Look! Oh, we got one!
Right there.
Marvellous! How do we take the end of the boat? Put it inside.
Yeah, just drop it inside.
He's in!
There we go.
In the years since Winford prowled the seabed of the Menai Strait, there's been a serious decline in the numbers of outsize lobsters. Now, this is another fellow that you really caught earlier.
Yes, and this is probably typical of the size you'll get these days.
And how big is that?
That's about 1.5 pounds in weight, whereas this fellow was 16.5.
Look at the size.
Yep. But you see, this is no good to a restaurant. Even you couldn't afford half of this on a plate.
No. Since his lobster hunting heyday, David has developed his business in Anglesey to include a smokery. But now you're going to try something new.
Yes, it's for the first time. We do make the hot roast salmon, but what we're going to do this time is we're going to use Welsh honey from here on Anglesey. The bees are over near Holyhead, and we're going to put this on as a glaze, and we're going to make honey roast salmon. And you'll be able to taste this for your lunch and give me your honest opinion. So we'll put this into the smoker now, and we'll make sure it's adjusted up to 82 degrees. Could you possibly open the door, please? Right, so we've got 2 with honey roast and 2 cold smoked that are going to convert into hot roast. There we go.
Stainless steel and thermometers improve the old way of smoking fish and meat. But traditional brine is stirred with a paddle. And then the fish is neatly filleted. Wonderful.
Hey, Trevor, fresh fillet sea bass caught this morning in the bay down the road here. Because I'm sure the old folk, they would get a good catch down here in the bay, and without electricity, there was no fridge and no freezer.
Right.
So you had to preserve your catch. So they must have discovered this method of brining and smoking, so you could eat this through the winter after the fish had left and the water was too rough and you couldn't go fishing.
After a good soak in the brine, the fish goes into the smoke oven.
Right, so I'll just check the eels in here.
Succulent eels are another of David's specialities, and he knows they're fresh because he catches them himself. They're remarkable travellers, eels. Starting in the Sargasso Sea, they cross the Atlantic, and these swim up culverts beneath the town of Beaumaris to this tranquil Anglesey Lake.
There you go.
You pleased with this?
Oh, these are excellent ones.
Good catch?
Yeah, look, they're excellent eels.
Yes, they are.
We put them back in the big tank at the smokery, you'll be able to see them swimming around.
And Dave, when did you get into this eel fishing?
When I started the smokery, Ray, it was people asking me, you know, for smoked eel. So at the moment, yesterday we went over by...
David's way of fishing, whether it's for lobsters or for eels, is to leave something for another day, to have an eye on the future. So you just take a little and then you move on?
Yeah. Keep it sustainable.
Yes.
The only thing I'm a little bit worried about this lake is I've not had any little ones. I've only been getting these whoppers. So I'm a bit concerned that these big fellas would have vanished this October, November, and there are no replacements.
What does that mean?
Well, it's well known that the returns of elvers are something like 90% down this last few years. So something's happening in the Sargassum or in the Atlantic, whether it's the Gulf Stream being diverted with the global warming. Friends of mine were on holiday in France the other week, and they said that the canals where they were fishing were full of eels because the anglers don't like them because they make such a mess of their gear. But apparently all the way down the west coast of France, they couldn't put a hook in without catching an eel. So maybe they're just going that bit further south.
All right, well, here we are, Trevor. Let's see what we've caught. It's impossible to sort them on the banks of the lake. I mean, they're straight into the grass and back in the lake. Under 30 centimetres you require by law to return them to the lake. So we put them in here, and any little ones we would put back. But as you can see, these are whoppers, a slither. They are Anglesey eels.
After all that work, I'm ready for the taste of the smokery. Well, Gwen, you've provided a banquet for us today. What's on the menu?
Well, today we've got some of our smoked chicken, which we made into a Caesar salad, always a popular one. Then we've got a few different fish for you to try. The smoked eel, the famous smoked eel from the local ponds. We've got some of the cold smoked salmon here. And then we've got some of the plain smoked mackerel. On the other plate here, then we've got some of the trout, the smoked trout that comes from the local reservoir. Some of our own eggs, not smoked. And then some tuna on the far side there. Not quite so local, of course.
And then we come to the star attraction.
We come for today's sample trial test, which is the hot smoked honey roast salmon.
Let's see what it tastes like, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all looking forward to seeing what it's like.
Oh. It's delicious. It's a winner.
Very good.
I expect we'd all like some now. Smoking our food is an ancient art brought up to date by modern technology. Compass net fishing is hard, but survives because enough men think it has value. And selecting a lobster by hand is a skill, an adventurous pleasure. Evening on the Menai Strait after an enjoyable time with a man who lives life to the full. Next week, we have other fish to fry. For our next adventure, you'll need your Wellington boots and a hard hat. We're heading underground. In Merioneth, we'll keep the home fires burning.